We're going to look at these reference atlas and we're going to look at the introductory pages to Unit 1 and Chapter 1 so that tomorrow we can get started on Lesson 1. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I want you guys to look at your books, but I am going to have it up on the screen so I can point things out. And on this page, this is the table of contents for the reference atlas. A lot of times the reference atlas is in the back of a book, but they have it in the front of the book in this particular book. So I want you to see what these are quickly, and then we're going to move on to Unit 1. But, of course, the reference atlas maps, RA1, that's what this is. So we have the world political, world physical, North America political, North America physical, United States, Canada, Middle America, which is, it's going to be the Caribbean islands, Mexico, Central America. We have South America, then we have Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia, Oceania, which would be like Australia and all the islands around there. And world time zones, polar regions, world extremes, and a dictionary, geographic dictionary. All right, so turn the page. And we talked about maps the other day, how they are distorted when you compare them to like Google Earth, because you're taking a sphere and you're trying to make it something that's flat, which is almost impossible to do. So they have to distort the way things look to get it all fit on there. So this is a political map. A political map shows you the boundaries where usually countries or states are. So you can see that in North America, the upper part is most of the United States, Canada, but there's a lot here in Central America, Caribbean islands, compared to the rest of the world. And you can see how large Russia is. Australia is one continent. It's also one country. And Antarctica is distorted. All right, so this is a political map. This is a physical map. And this particular physical map does not have boundaries, geographic boundaries. So this lets you see the world as it is in reference to mountain ranges, deserts, things like that. So you can see the Sahara Desert is right here. You can see Australia, which they refer to as the outback. You can see part of Asia is. You can see part of North America is, and then part of South America is. By the way, this is the Arabian Peninsula, and it is mostly desert. So I want to reference right here the Sahara, because we've had, this last year, we had our sun blocked partially during the day and during sunset. And you might think it was just dirt in the air from our own dirt, like farmers tilling, but it was actually Saharan sand that had been picked up on the wind and crossed all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, crossed all this and even made it into Oklahoma. So we have, the Sahara has actually fertilized parts of South America, like the Amazon desert, but they could see it on satellite video. They could see the particles in the air crossing over into North America. That was this summer. All right, turn the page. Here we have North America, political and physical, but they do have the boundaries here. So they do have the political boundaries, even though it's a physical map on this side. All right, turn the page. Here is the United States political. So they're showing you this way, so you can see Alaska where it is located and Hawaii where it is located. And they have the lines of latitude and longitude there for you. And Puerto Rico also belongs to America, so it is right down here, and they're showing you that. All right, if you turn the page again. Here is the United States physical, but they've taken and put Alaska in an inset map here with a scale, and they've done the same thing with the Hawaiian Islands with its own scale. So this scale is different from this scale, and they wanted you to see those on the same map. All right, turn the page. This one is Canada, physical / political. So they have them combined there. Turn the page. Here's Middle America, physical and political. Then we have South America, political, South America, physical. And you can see how much is actually Brazil. It's huge. And you can see how much of it is the Amazon basin and then the highlands that we'll talk about as well. Turn the page. This is Europe political. Where we were mostly referred to political on Europe is we're going to look at Spain, Portugal, England, and France, because those were the countries that explored the Western Hemisphere. We're going to also talk about those, and we're going to look at Africa in regard to slavery. But we're also going to point out parts of Asia, like where Turkey in this area is. This was the region that started slavery, okay? And these other countries just got in on it. And the slavery didn't start with Africa. It started in this area with other people as well. But if you look at, as far as slavery with Africans, let me clarify that. If you look up here, I do want to point this out. This is Russia, but you have the Ural Mountains here. So it's not all of Russia. It's just that most of the people that live there are here. So it says here, a commonly accepted division between Asia and Europe, here marked by a gray line, is formed by the Ural Mountains, Ural River, Caspian Sea, Caucasus Mountains, and the Black Sea and its outlets, the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. So this is the Europe boundary. It's not the end of Russia, but this is the European boundary, and then it continues. Then it becomes Asia. Because some people actually teach in their country Eurasia, because Europe touches Asia. So instead of those two continents, they combine them as one, saying Eurasia. But in America, we count them this way. This is a physical map of Europe. Once again, there's the Ural Mountains. All right, turn the page. Here's Africa political, Africa physical. The Africa physical map doesn't change, but the Africa political map does change based on wars that have happened. And you can see how it connects here to Asia. So anyway, I wanted you to keep this little area in mind. Turn the page. This is the Middle East. So what we just looked at, here's that little area, and they call this the Middle East. So you have Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen, Oman, Iraq, Kuwait, which is tiny, and I want you to know that this is so much desert, they don't have water. And so because they can't grow their own food, Saudi Arabia, they use desalinization, but that they also haul in their drinking water, and they import all of their food, because they can't grow it themselves unless they grow it in greenhouses. All right, so also I was just talking about how they import all their own food, how they import the majority of their food unless they grow it in greenhouses and that type of thing. Here's Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan. So this is called the Middle East. You'll learn more about this next year. Turn the page. Here's Asia. So we pointed out the dividing line for Asia and Europe. So here's Europe, starting with this mountain range, and this is all Asia. But Russia is in both Europe and Asia, which is unusual for that to happen, but it is. Okay, turn the page. Here's the physical map of Asia, which includes these countries as well. Here is Oceania, the physical map of Oceania. And so it shows you, this is all one country, but then you have the Marshall Islands, you have all these different islands that are down here. So it's physical and political. And here's our time zone map. So I want to look at this for a minute. There are some places where they're irregular time zone. They may not want to go by the time zone or for whatever reason. But they had to come up with a time zone, and they started with, so they came up with time zones because everybody kept different time. So like, especially in America, I'll give the example of the railroad. The conductor kept time as he was going on the train, and he was following the sun, and where he stopped in one station and then went to the other station, the times didn't match up. So the trains always seemed like they were off. People didn't move very fast, so time zones didn't really matter. But with the invention of the railroad, people could move much faster than they could with walking or riding a horse. So if you're walking or riding a horse, it didn't really matter time zone. But when we started getting mass transportation like railroads, They had to come up with a time zone so everybody knew exactly what time trains would be on time, that type of thing. So that started with mass transportation. Other than that, you didn't really need a time zone before then. All right, turn the page. Here is a map of the Arctic Ocean. So you can see it's Greenland, where parts of Canada, Alaska's in that, Russia, parts of Europe. So there's no landmass right here, but it freezes enough that sometimes this is solid. Antarctica is also one country all by itself. But I want you to see the shape of it compared to other maps that we look at it. All right, look at the next page, World of Extremes. And this shows you like where the highest waterfall in the world is. It's in Angel Falls in South America. We're going to talk about that this year. The smallest country is actually the Vatican City. So where the Pope lives, that's considered its own little country by itself. So it's like a little country inside of a country. The largest country is Russia. It goes into Europe and Asia. We have the deepest lake. We have the smallest continent, the highest mountain, which of course is Mount Everest, the longest river, which is the Nile River, and the largest desert, which is the Sahara Desert. All right, turn the page. For geographical terms, this is a dictionary for you. So it's not just a dictionary, it actually has some illustrations at the top. So it's not like having to look it up in the glossary and read what a mountain peak is or what a mountain is. You can see it here. We're going to work with some of these in another way as well. All right, turn the page, and we're going to start looking at the pages for Unit 1, the world. And for Unit 1, the world, you can see at the bottom, there are 3 chapters. We have the geographer's world, which is mostly going to be focusing on maps, latitude, longitude, the essential elements of geography. Chapter 2 is physical geography, and we get into what affects that, natural disasters, how people move. Then we get into human geography. So let's turn the page and let's take a look on exploring our world. Explore the world. Geography is the study of Earth and all its variety. When you study geography, you learn about the planet's land, water, plants, and animals. Some people call Earth the water planet. Do you know why? Water in the form of streams, rivers, lakes, seas, and oceans covers nearly 70% of Earth's surface. A lot of times people refer to the ocean as the sea, but usually a sea is a smaller body of salt water. It's usually locked in land somewhere, or it is mostly surrounded by land. All right, look at number 1. Bodies of water. Undersea explorers can still experience the thrill of investigating uncharted territory, one of Earth's largest frontiers. Almost all of the Earth's water consists of a continuous body of water that circles the planet. This body of water makes up 5 oceans: the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, the Southern, and the Arctic. Landforms, number 2. Landforms are features of the land, such as mountains, valleys, and canyons. Landforms influence where people live and how they relate to the environment. Number 3, natural resources. Natural resources are products of Earth that people use to meet their needs. Solar energy is power produced by the heat of the sun. Sun and wind are renewable resources. These resources cannot be used up. All right, and if you look right here, it says fast fact, the Earth's largest mountain range is underwater. All right, turn the page. For this unit, we have a physical map here. And what they've done to this physical map is they've included a key showing you what these colors mean. So the blue is below sea level, so obviously that's going to be like the oceans. But there is an area that is below sea level in America, and it's in the landlocked area. It's where one of our national parks is, in fact. You can see the light green says that it's 0 feet to, below sea level to 0 feet is the water. Then you have 0 feet for the green to 1,000 feet. For the lighter green is 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet. Yellow is 2,000 to 5,000 feet. Orange is 5,000 to 10,000 feet. So you can see that the majority of the Rocky Mountains is orange. Anything above 10,000 feet is red. So you can see in Colorado that there's some red. You can see that down here in South America is some red. And then the other red that you can see is going to be in Asia. This is where Mount Everest is. I'm not really sure why they have Antarctica here like this, except because it is land. I guess some of it is mountain range that's high enough. I just didn't realize that part. All right, turn the page. Here is the political. And what's different about this political is that where they have made just like some little initials, they tell you down here what the initials stand for. Because when you get into places like Europe, where some of the countries are really tiny, or the Caribbean islands, for instance, they have to use abbreviations, and then they tell you what those are. Turn the page. This one is a population map. So it tells you what the population is. So if you look at the lightest color, which is that light yellow, that is like Antarctica. It means that there's less than 2.5 people that live there. Well, nobody lives at Antarctica all the time.
2.5 people.
That's the average, because it's not owned by any country. Nobody lives there full time. And so the people that do live there are temporary, and they're scientists. So scientists go down there temporary and live. So they're very few compared to the amount of land. So that's why it's that. The yellow is 2.5 to 24 people per square mile. This is per square mile, sorry. So if you look at up here in Canada, and this part of Alaska at the top, Greenland, this part of Russia, that is because it's frozen. So hardly anybody lives up there. So when you look at the people per square mile, anywhere from 2.5 to 24, they're taking an average. There's really not a half a person, okay? But they're just saying if you could take it and divide it, that's what it ends up being per square mile. The orange is 25 to 62. You can look at 63 to 24, but let's look at the really highly populated, which would be the purple, that you have over 1,250 people per square mile. In cities like New York, London, some of those places, and then especially in Asia. In India, it's one of the most populated places in the world. In this part of China, one of the most populated places in the world. And when we get to human geography, we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, turn the page. This next one is land use and resources. So the first one on the left are the resources. It shows you where coal is mined, where petroleum is. So like you can see the little oil derricks in the ocean, in the Gulf of Mexico, because we have offshore oil rigs there. You can see a lot of different things that are here. Then if you look at the land use, oh, by the way, if you look at diamonds, the majority of the diamonds that are mined are in Africa, in this region of Africa. And that, unfortunately, has caused some terrible conditions for the people living there in those countries over the years, including war, that you will get into that next year, okay? But if you look at the land use map, the gray is little or no activity, so you can see Antarctica, and in desert regions like here in Australia, in the Sahara, up here where it's frozen, you see that? But you can see, of course, where commercial fishing is, which is in the oceans mostly. You can see manufacturing and trade. Everywhere you see one of those red squares, that's where manufacturing and trade happens. And there are quite a few in North America because we have a lot of resources that we can manufacture. Primarily forest is the light green. Most of that's up here. In fact, we get most of our newspaper and paper from Canada because of all the forest they have there. So we'll get into that later. But you can see the different colors and what they represent. All right, let's turn the page. This one shows the different climate regions. So, for instance, the big part where we live is light green or this tan. So if you look, the tan is semi-arid and steppe, and then humid subtropical. So part of western Oklahoma is in the semi-arid steppe, but part of the rest of Oklahoma is humid subtropical. So it does affect like how much rain we get, elevation affects that, and so forth. You can see where it's arid is desert. So this gives you some information. But if you look at North America, for instance, in the United States, we have quite a variety right here. And part of it's orange. The orange is a Mediterranean climate. And that is the type of conditions, like the amount of rainfall, the temperature conditions. And it's named after this area right here around the Mediterranean Sea. Because all of this little area right here bordering it is like that. All right, turn the page. Chapter 1 for Unit 1. You can see that there's a scientist here. This is a glaciologist. You can see right in here it says glaciologist. Who drills for an ice sample. So if you were a scientist that wanted to study ice, snow, what is mixed in, they're finding now tiny particles of plastic in snow and ice, even in Antarctica, which tells us that it's been picked up from around the world, circulated in the atmosphere, and the snow, when it's falling, you may not be able to see it with your eyes, but when they take samples and look under a microscope, they're seeing tiny particles of plastic that's in our air now, which makes me wonder if that's partly why we have so many breathing issues as well now too. All right, but the essential question for the geographer's world is, how does geography influence the way people live? The lesson 1 is going to be how geographers view the world. Lesson 2, the geographer's tool. So we're going to do lesson 1 tomorrow. Lesson 2 the next day. All right, the story matters. Since ancient times, people have drawn maps to show their known world. As people explored, they came into contact with different places and people, which expanded their understanding of the world. Today, what we know about the world continues to grow as geographers study the world's environments with the latest technology. More importantly, by understanding the connections between humans and the environment, geographers can find solutions to significant problems. Take a look at the photograph of the Earth. I think that's really amazing. You can actually see the Arabian Peninsula right here. Do you see that? And so this is going to be Africa, and this is Europe, and then this is Russia that's covered up by the clouds. All right, turn the page. Looking at this map, we can see it's a totally different looking map than what we've seen so far. This is what, if you took a sphere and took a basketball and wanted to cut it to be flat, it would look more like this. So the shape would look more like this. In cutting it this way, look at what they did to Antarctica. Okay, kind of split between the four sections. But you can see North America, South America, Africa, Asia. You can see it a little bit more the way it's arranged, even though we know Africa is way bigger than this map shows and South America is way bigger than this map shows. But you can see the 7 continents. Oh, by the way, here's a little tidbit for you. America studies it as 7 continents. I have a friend from Nicaragua. He learned 5 continents. They learn Americas because technically North and South America are touching because of Panama. So they learn Americas as 1 continent. They call this Eurasia because it's touching. That makes sense. Look how much it's touching. It's not hanging on by a little thread. They learn Africa, Antarctica, and Australia. So they learn 5, but we learn 7. We break it up into 7. And I believe Europe does that too. All right, but look at the timeline down here, stepping into the time. I want you to see, it says describing. You don't have to write a paragraph, but what they're doing with this timeline is they're starting at 150. So the green is going to be like where we start saying AD. All right? So at 150, Ptolemy creates an atlas of the known world, and the known world would not have included any of this part of the world. It would have only been this part of the world. Then we have, here's 1000 AD, here's 2000 AD is where they're stopping the timeline. So we don't have anything past 2000 AD on this timeline. So you're not looking at the pictures to figure it out, you're looking at the dots. So in 1519, the first thing they have plotted here is Magellan set sail on voyage around the world. You guys learned about that last year. 1803, U.S. purchased Louisiana Territory. You guys did not get to that in U.S. history last year. 1904, Robert Peary reaches the North Pole. Then there's 2 dots really close together on this timeline because they're just a few years apart. This one goes this direction, and it's Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay reached the top of Mount Everest. So these two men were the first known to reach the top of Mount Everest, and because cameras had been invented and in use for quite a time, they took a picture. That's a picture of them. All right, then we have the next one is 1969, and it's Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. All right, turn the page, because tomorrow we're going to start Lesson 1, Geographer's View of the World. So to just let you kind of see what it looks like, you can just flip through for a minute and see that, look, we're learning about latitude and longitude here. You're going to be learning some vocabulary words. The 5 themes of geography, which is very, very important to geography. You're going to know those. It talks about human environment interaction, movement, and then also some 6 essential elements. All right, then in chapter 2, we're talking about the tools that geographers use, looking once again at maps, about different types of maps, how they play a role in our lives, and the technology used in those systems now, like GPS. So that's chapters 1 and 2. We'll talk a little bit about Google, and then we're going to also review the notes for the test and take the test, and then I'll elaborate a little bit more later on.